You're listening to Pardon the Disruption with your host, Tom Young.
Hi, everybody. Hey, welcome to the show. This is Tom Young. Let's go around the room.
Hi, this is Bart Gallo.
This is TJ Young.
This is Rohan Kapoor.
Hey, guys. Hey, thanks for joining the show today. Hey, today we're going to talk about the topic that is on a lot of people's minds. It's around RPA, robotic process automation, and we're going to claim that RPA is not dead. And talk a little bit about the article that Phil First from Horses for Sources put out, basically claiming that RPA is dead, which seems a little counterintuitive based on some of the things that are happening. So we're going to get into review some of the content in his article and talk about it. But the first thing we want to do is we developed a video on digital labor. We launched that, maybe about when will we launch that?
About 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Okay. About a month ago.
So this is a primer to give people. We used a sort of
Primer?
Did I say primer?
I think so. Primer's good.
I think primer actually works.
I thought they were both acceptable. I say primer. I don't really use that much at all.
It's an American thing.
I think, yeah, it must be the Brit, of course.
All right,
Yeah,
so
no need to get.
I'll educate you guys.
I say
There's
gasoline.
no need to get in a tizzy over this.
I say gas. You can say petrol, right? And I'm going to put that in the trunk, and you can put it in your boot.
Yeah.
No offense.
Or we can put a few containers of it in the trolley at the store.
All right.
So anyway, so we did
RPA.
So we did this digital labor video, and it's largely following very similar to a Kurz-Kazaga theme style of video, but we're going to play about a 2-minute clip here. You can go watch on our website the whole clip because it's a broader topic of digital labor, but this first 2 minutes really introduces RPA just to make sure everybody's on the same page. So let's go play that clip.
The world is changing faster than ever before, and the technology we rely on is getting smarter. Key advancements like robotic process automation and artificial intelligence are revolutionizing the modern workplace. Digital labor now affects our daily lives in one way or another, but what is it exactly? We're not talking about physical robots. A bot is a simple excerpt of computer code designed to perform a repetitive business process, the same way a human would. Think of all the tedious back-office paperwork that has become the reality of today's business environment. Humans act as the middlemen between data sources and applications that don't integrate well together, bogging down the efficiency and productivity of a company. Bots automate these workloads, maintaining and executing the data handling, reconciliation, and reporting steps typically done by humans. For years, we've had bots in the form of scripts running invisibly behind the technology we use every day. They handle the heavy lifting to churn through data or produce reports on command, but are usually customized for a certain system or technology. What makes RPA different is the platform's ability to construct bots that work with almost any application by executing commands directly on the front-end application interface, using the same portals and required screen navigation a human would use to complete a task. Bots operate extremely fast and do not make errors, but are very rigid. For situations involving dynamic, unstructured data or requiring complex understanding, RPA does not fare well.
So again, you can see from that clip, as I mentioned before, I used the term the Kurz-Kazaga video. That's I guess it's based out of Germany, right? They do this. They do these shorts. Anyway, we use that same style. You can go on YouTube. They do a lot of cool commercial or videos on YouTube where they break down complex subjects. We try to do something similar here with digital labor. You can go to our website or the YouTube channel and see the rest of that video because it gets into the AI side. But we want to focus today on the RPA. So let's up on the screen we have in our studio here. We have the RPA is dead, long live integrated automation platforms, and we can look at some of the points that Phil makes here, but the headline is sort of clickbait a little bit to get people to read the article.
Yeah.
Because the headline almost implicates or indicates to me an or versus an and.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's not that it's RPA or integrated automation platforms, because if it's the choice between the two, I'll take the integrated automation platform, but it's and.
And he actually makes a lot of good points if you actually read the article. I think the headline was meant to be a little bit provocative just to get people looking at it. But in today's Instagram culture, I think a lot of people sharing the article on LinkedIn are just reading the headline and saying, hey, look at UiPath Automation Anywhere. That's old news now. RPA is dead. Look at my new product. But if you actually read the article, there's a lot of good stuff here. Bart, if you scroll down, there's a diagram, pretty simple diagram showing people, process, technology, and orange bubbles. Keep going down, right there. So he's making the point that RPA got so hot that practitioners and the people that were happy to sell it were throwing RPA at all their problems and hoping it would be like silver bullet. Right? So that's the whole point of the right chart here, and we can show this on the YouTube video too, is that all the focus is on the technology, the software itself, without thinking about process, without thinking about change management and the people, without thinking about data, which is a fourth element that should be really included here. And that's something we talk about too. RPA is a component of a larger solution, so it's not dead, but it's not the only thing. What's dead are the programs that rely on RPA solely to digitize their operations and to transform their operations to that digital end state. That's what's dead.
Yeah. I think it's something which when we talk to people, they understand that. I think RPA as a standalone solution is not the end goal here and the long-term goal. And I think one thing he mentioned in the article was around basically RPA, only like a small proportion of organizations have been able to successfully scale RPA, therefore it's dead. And I mean, people we talk to are very well aware of the fact that it needs to be integrated as part of a wider strategy. So I definitely think it's a great title though. It's a very provocative title. And
it's eye-catching, click-grabbing.
Yeah,
for sure.
And he's also thrown some statistics around the number of people that watched it. So it's successfully worked for him. But,
I think even if the focus is moving away from RPA as one of the hottest technologies at a lot of industry firms applying different emerging technologies, I think you can't ignore the fact that it was foundational to the journey that a lot of these companies are on, applying things like AI and data platforms.
Yeah. Well, Bart, you've done a lot of RPA deployments. I mean, there's a heavy non-technical focus to actually making a business impact, right? The RPA is just a component of the solution.
Of course.
Yeah. So, and I think, again, the notion that people, the trap they fall into is kind of what TJ said, is this notion that technology in and of itself is a silver bullet. It's almost never the case. And, we see it with, even going back in the old days when people were deploying ERP systems, they thinking somehow if I buy this ERP system, it's going to solve all my crazy process problems around book close or other kinds of enterprise reporting. And what ends up happening is they try to continue to focus on the technology and blame the technology for poor processes. So, what we found is the RPA is a very good intake to understanding the points of pressure of where users want to see the technologies platforms that they're operating on operate differently. So when they find themselves having to navigate a complex technology platform with repetitive tasks, the RPA resolves that very quickly, but also at the edge of the architecture, meaning they're not really... What we found is where the RPA breaks down is it doesn't get into the core architecture and therefore becomes very fragile. So imagine I'm operating this complex system and the RPA sits like a macro at the edge and performs some of these functions for people, making them more productive. Well, that core system is changing all the time and the RPA ends up breaking and it's very fragile because it's relying on these API interfaces. Well, if you could somehow bring that into the core and fix it, you would eliminate the need for the RPA at the edge, and it would be available in the entire system and lead to fixing the system. And I think a lot of people set these RPAs up and they don't follow through with learning from all the RPAs and then doing the process redesign behind the scenes.
Yeah. I think it's a great entry point for a lot of these companies to adopt because of its relative ease of adoption, the low-hanging fruit that it solves with some of the problems that it can solve for. I mean, it's cheap and it's effective, but you're right. I think it's just the first entry point in a longer-term strategy, and I think people have been relying on it too much as their long-term strategy, which is kind of why I guess he's put this article out as well.
And his point on a single solution being dead if that's your only tool in your solution set to transform and digitize process, that applies to other technologies too. I mean, if you invest in a cognitive virtual agent to deploy for your front office to make your call center a bit more modernized, and you just have that and think that that's going to solve your issues, that's going to fail as well.
Yeah.
His point is, what is this integrated platform? So integrated with what? It's not just more tools, but it's a set of methodologies that work together that you can use to approach digital transformation really at scale, as opposed to spot projects with limited ROI.
Right.
Yeah.
Having the right tool for the job every time if your solution set is diverse enough.
Exactly. And it's RPA. I mean, I know you said over-reliance on APIs, but I would argue that RPA really has an over-reliance on the front-end UI interactions, which is why it's not very stable. But in combination with an API gateway methodology at scale, in combination with process orchestration and BPM platforms, with the virtual agents that can use those bots to go execute workloads, in combination with the underlying data management frameworks, the enterprise information management
all the data
protocols
coming off of that.
Right. Get the architects in the room, have them make sure that the foundation's there to feed the data for these tools that actually work effectively. And of course, the advanced analytics and the AI ML on top of all this. It's in silos, all of it has limited impact, but together, that's what he's really talking about. Together, it's this integrated digital toolkit that you can approach end-to-end process to transform at scale versus these spot projects.
So why do you think, we mentioned companies don't go far enough. Why do you think that is? Because it seems like it's required as
I don't know. It's hard work. It's hard work. I mean, I don't want to say people are lazy, because that would be a misnomer. But I think they're not disciplined, and they want that silver bullet. They somehow think that there's this magic technology that's going to solve all their problems. And process redesign. If you're going to start a new company, you're going to start it from the ground up, and you're going to probably build it with digital processes and have a very different way of doing business. And you see that today with, firms that have probably started in the last 10 to 15 years. They look very different than firms that have been around for 40 or 50 years. So if you're pivoting from the old to the new, it's a lot harder than building new, because the change management that goes with process changes involves people. And I think what the RPA does is it takes some of the workload away from the people and allow you to re-engineer the processes and the systems behind the scenes at the core, so that you don't have to involve people in the change management. And then what ends up happening is I see the RPA as an intake to the process redesign work that can be done. And the value that RPA gives you is there's the nominal value of providing productivity at the edge. So I'm making a person more productive, and if I do it at scale, I can eliminate some of my people. That's a harder trick. But both of those provide value. The more intrinsic value is that it gives me the ability now to re-engineer the system without the obstacles and hurdles of dealing with people to change. But if you don't see it that way, if you don't follow through, you're going to end up with 100 bots, 200 bots, 500 bots. And all of a sudden, it's going to be very expensive to maintain that bot complex, because by their very nature, they're fragile in that kind of environment.
And your question before, Rowan, you said, why do people resist this or not want to do this, right? We don't want to say they're lazy. I think it's, to your point, I mean, RPA it's easy to deploy, and we're not changing the process.
Yeah.
You can have 500 bots in your environment and no process changes. And that's, by design.
Yeah.
Right.
If we're not changing process, which means there's less change and less disruption for the organization, which means less resistance.
Yeah, we've even built that into our discovery process at previous clients, where we talk to business stakeholders. Like, we're not here to help you fix your process. We want to automate as is.
Right.
And that's evolved, but still.
But it's an evolution. It's not we're going to throw all this tech at it and then we're finally at this digital end state. You're asking, why don't people just do this? It's because the rest of the integrated tool set and methodologies requires a lot of change.
Right.
It's a lot of disruption, and people just want to show up at work, do their work, and go home.
Yeah.
And you're gonna muddy up their lives. RPA is the one exception in that larger toolkit that does not require that much change.
Yeah.
So I think people had a short-sightedness and said, "Oh, well, and this is our answer," but it's not the end game. It's just the beginning.
Yeah.
It's the intake, so you can digitize process, but you're not changing the process. It's still the same workflow, but you're separate. To your point, we're separating humans from the discussion, so that we can have a separate but parallel timeline where we can transform process and apply more advanced technologies as well.
Yeah. I think there's a talent component to it as well. We talk about the shortage of talent to work on emerging technologies in these environments a lot. Like, I wonder if a lot of these types of firms have chosen some of their best resources, mix of technical and functional skills, to focus on building out an RPA COE, and then they no longer have those best resources to say, hey, go do the analytics COE or some other technology COE. So I think there might be a talent shortage component to it as well, at least in the near term.
I mean, especially, we've seen this in data scientists and cybersecurity in particular for the past few years.
Right.
But the issue is it's the technologies are increasing. The pace of change is so fast that I think the education systems and the talent pools can't keep up. But on top of that, I think the window of relevancy per skill type is shortening. So we need a whole bunch of data scientists today, and then maybe in 3 years it's a different kind of data scientist, more of a data consultant.
Right.
So it's much more frequent.
Bart, you and TJ are both Automation Anywhere, which is another RPA firm. You're both RPA certified.
Yes.
All right. And so when did you pass your certification?
About
Almost
two years ago.
Almost 2 or 3.
So I'm asking about the relevancy. So do you guys still feel as current as you did when you passed your proficiency exam?
I'd say 75%.
Yeah,
from where I was
that's
when we
accurate.
passed. Yeah.
I want to see the latest updates in their latest version.
The AA suite is progressing rapidly, right? Aren't they adding new stuff to it? We just looked at some of the stuff that they were adding in.
Yeah, so I believe what they're adding in is they're doing what like ServiceNow and other platforms that try to just absorb in other functionality. So in the past, they were purely RPA. We did a lot of work that had to combine their solution with, say, OCR.
Right.
Because a lot of the intakes for these repetitive processes, the input data was not repetitive. It was unstructured. It was scanned order documents. We said, hey, we have thousands of orders every day in whatever country, and it's the same process to deal with it. We have all these people that manage these orders, but it's hard to actually build bots to do it because the intake is always a bit unstructured, right? It's these scanned forms, handwritten, different formats.
Front 10% of a specific task.
So you need, so object character recognition, which is using ML, AI methodology to understand patterns in unstructured data so that you can pigeonhole them into swim lanes for something as rigid as RPA to apply. Yeah. So they call it IQ bots specific to AA. It's their way of applying that within the suite or offering it within the suite so that you don't have to use a third-party piece of software. You can just do more work within their environment. I think that's their strategy to expand, build it, make it a bit more smart, quote-unquote smart, build more of that OCR, AI methodology within the tool set.
But I bring it up because you mentioned the obsolescence of the knowledge because it's moving rapidly. There's a component of that, but also the talent issue and the talent shortage. I think, neither one of you guys are programming backgrounds. No. But you were able to learn it. And I think it's your guys' skill sets that's really required in the industry, which is, the term polymath, which is somebody who's multidisciplined, where you have the business consulting side where you understand business processes, but can also take it all the way out to the codification of these RPA bots so that you can then take it and follow through with the back-end engineering. I think at some level, I never liked the term RPA. I mean, I know what it is. I've been working with it for over 5 years. When the industry term came out, slightly before that, I never liked the term, and I'm using it now because it's a default term. But I was slow to use it because I thought the term robotic in the RPA terminology created a false connotation of what it is, right? It's not a physical robot, and it very rarely takes over an entire person's workflow, right? It doesn't do that. It takes over, a routine task or a group of tasks that follow into a bucket.
Right.
And this is wherein lies some of the issues we've had around benefits realization, where people think, robotic process automation, I'm going to put a bunch of these bots out there and they're going to replace people. Well, they could, but not unless you change the back end workflow. And I think therein lies the rub and why this is maybe getting some mixed reaction. But I think RPA is far from dead.
It's getting a mixed reaction, but to Phil's credit, it's getting a lot of buzz, and I think that's tapping into something. And I think what it's tapping into is people's frustration with the promise for these huge business cases that just aren't hitting.
Yeah.
And it's because of the original point we made around people thinking it's a silver bullet, people not taking into account, we need to eventually transform process. We need to eventually kind of restack the way we approach our FTE landscape, redefine the roles, redefine what work is from our standpoint if we're going to be flooding this system with scripts and bots and AI and virtual agents and all this stuff. If we don't do that, the business case will never be there. Because again, RPA automates tasks, not really the process or the people themselves.
Right. The benefits realization is work within itself. It's not just deploy the technology, see the benefits.
Right.
It's do the work of restacking the work, restructuring your organization, rethinking your processes to reap those benefits.
Right.
Yeah.
Without a broader plan to incorporate cognitive computing, virtual agents, AI, analytics, and all the stuff that's not as fun or sexy around the enterprise information framework and the architecture and all that stuff, this will never work at scale. That's the truth.
Yeah.
It's a much broader program than throwing RPA at the problem.
That to me is the key takeaway. The RPA provides a critical input and lays a critical set of groundwork to do the business process engineering that has eluded legacy firms from operating digitally. Right? I'm doing a greenfield. I'm not gonna have to worry about a lot of stuff because I'm gonna design it the right way. But I'm trying to pivot an old line company to a new digital way of thinking. Good luck. And what this does, so Bart, pull up that article we had from TechCrunch around the recent valuation that UiPath got. And so they just arranged Series D financing of $568 million at an implied valuation of $7 billion. I mean, these are incredible numbers. I think
That's nuts.
Automation Anywhere, I think the last time I saw their valuation, they were at $3.5 billion. And, you've got other companies out there like Blue Prism, Thoughtonomy, WorkFusion,
Pegasystems with
OpenSpan. And then you're going to see firms like ServiceNow, probably BMC, and others who are already in the system start to do things. You'll probably see Salesforce as well start to add some RPA things into their components. So you'll start to see this expand out. So a lot of money is betting on this as being a big impact. And I think where I see this being a big impact is our ability to use this as the, again, I use the term intake, the intake to the business process reengineering.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, if you don't see the follow through on this, I think you are going to get frustrated with the lack of benefits realization and the cost of maintaining RPA at the edge of your architecture for long periods of time, because these things do break down. In the deployment that you guys worked on last, you had about 200 bots in deployment, maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, around that.
And as you got those out there, they started to break down in production, right? Because things change, you got to go fix them, right? Now I start adding zeros to that, and now I have 2,000 bots or 20,000 bots, whatever the number is.
And the point is the edge changes much more than the core. So when we talk about the core, we're talking about the back end, really the infrastructure that's supporting all these applications, right? So we say if you can integrate through an API versus access to the front end, that's much more stable because the modules and the objects that the API takes advantage of, those don't change as much as the web interface for these applications.
Right.
So that using an API instead is one step towards integrating with core systems, integrating with core functionality. Really, the ideal state would be one big application that can do it all. And I think that's what everyone tries to customize ERP systems like SAP to be, but the reality is it's not the case.
Hey, Bart, can you throw up that one picture we have with the RPA edge versus core while we're talking about this? Put it up on the screen.
Sure.
And we can put it in the video when we're recording this. But I would say the simple way to think about core versus edge is systems of record versus systems of engagement.
Right.
And the example we use to explain it easily to everybody is think of financial systems on Wall Street, right? The systems that actually execute the trading and house the data for stock prices, open, close, volume, that kind of stuff is untouchable by end users. Very few people can get access to that. But if I ask all four of us to get, say, IBM stock price, we may go to 4 different systems of engagement to get that exact same data. And assuming that we have good systems of engagement, we'll all come back with the same answer. But we're all tapping the exact same system of record. And so when we talk about the dynamic edge, these systems of engagement, they're constantly changing. And the RPA sits there. What we want to do is, as we build out RPA, we want to study it in the landscape of the overall architecture and migrate it back into the core so it becomes not just something that it's localized by a group of users, but something that is used by the entire ecosystem and allows us to redefine the processes so that we have a more efficient business model.
Right, versus trying to force everyone into a standard system of engagement, which goes against what the whole trend of the presentation layer in and of itself. I think we're moving towards a case of hyper customization based on the personas accessing these systems. An executive accessing the same application, or maybe it's a dashboard showing some kind of insight, is not the same thing as an engineer or a low-level operational employee accessing the same application but looking at different data. You want the presentation layer to be customized based on the audience, based on the credentials, based on the persona. You don't want to have to standardize the engagement layer because we want the automation to sit on the edge.
Yeah.
It really restricts humans from what they should be.
Right.
You pull that automation and standardization to the core and allow for hyper dynamic presentation layers, allow for full flexibility at the systems of engagement. Right.
Because then you're forcing the digital workforce and the human workforce to bend to each other's weaknesses in that case, when you shouldn't have to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So next week, the 4 of us will be at IPSauce Digital Workforce Summit in Lower Manhattan. I think it's at the Conrad Hotel over by the New York Mercantile Exchange. There'll be quite a few people there in the industry, and I look forward to having some conversations with people to get different perspectives on what's happening and really how RPA is fitting into the broader, I'll call it the broader advancement of advanced technologies in the business processes. But I'm going to guess that the issue we just discussed with RPA being not the silver bullet, I think we're going to see a little bit of that at the Digital Workforce Summit. I think people are still underestimating in the aggregate the non-technical work required to deploy these technical solutions. Right? There's a lot of change management, business process redesign, process mapping that must go with this in order to achieve some real results at scale.
Yeah.
And that's what we like to help people with. And so we're looking forward to this Workforce Summit next week to engage in some conversations and inform our thinking as well. So you guys looking forward to that conference?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Should be really good.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah,
And it is just one point. I guess it's not just the non-technical aspects that people don't think about. It's also other technical aspects. When you say technical, everyone thinks the focus is on the development of the bots. And again, so Bart, keep me honest here. That was the least amount of effort that we had put into the work to get to where we were at our past client sites.
Definitely.
The technical work we're talking about is the technical work outside of RPA. It's the integration work.
Right.
So and again, that's where Phil gets us right. There's not enough focus on the integration work from a technical perspective. That's what we're talking about. That, along with the non-technical stuff around process changing, redesigning, process mining, all of that together, it's very complicated. but it has to be done if you want to achieve scale.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, just integrating the RPA with the internal security.
Yeah, months.
Right.
Months.
That's boring stuff, but it has
Yeah.
to be done. And they're trying to convince guys like, hey, well, all we're doing is repeating this process with software. Like, well, it's not certified. It's not audited.
Identity and access
Architectural
management.
qualifications.
all that kind of stuff.
Have fun.
So, it's a lot of work to do here. And there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for people who understand the end-to-end process, and RPA is a component of it to go drive that out. So anyway, we don't think RPA is dead. I don't think Phil actually meant it that way anyway, but that's what the title said. So we're going to say the opposite.
And give us a chance to say RPA is not dead.
That's right. We're going to do the counter headline. RPA is not dead. And
Long live
we'll see
RPA.
how that goes. All right. All right. We'll look
Great.
forward to seeing you guys next week.
All right, good stuff.
Thanks.
Bye. Hey, thanks for listening to Pardon the Disruption. We'd like you to subscribe to our podcast if you like it. You can find us on most of the platforms where you get your podcast from, whether that be iTunes or YouTube or whatever you're on. We also want some feedback. Which shows do you want us to cover? What do you like? What do you not like? So that we can do this. We're doing this for you. We're not doing this for anything else. So please subscribe and give us some feedback. Thank you very much.